Hey, welcome to Mikey's Video Game Madness. Today we're playing Donkey Kong Country on the Super Nintendo. I remember seeing this in my favorite magazine. It was called Nintendo Sega Game Players. Then they came out with a not as good magazine called Ultra Game Players. And then there was a unofficial PlayStation magazine where most of the editors went to that was called PSN, which is PlayStation magazine, but it was the unofficial one, and I thought it was way better than the official PlayStation magazine that actually came with the demo disc. But I remember seeing screenshots of this game, but they were like the screenshots that when they were creating the CGI characters, they were like these super detailed renderings and stuff like that. And I kind of skimmed through the pages. I was a Sega person at the time, so I really didn't care what was coming out on Super Nintendo. I just kind of casually looked. I was one of those people that only looked up things that I either really wanted, which I eventually got a Super Nintendo and caught up on everything I missed out on, and I missed out on quite a lot. But the good thing about adopting a generation a little bit later, everything's out and you can experience so much in so much a short amount of time. Like if you're an early adopter of a system, you have to wait for every game to come out, but it's also depressing. You get super excited about the system when you're a late adopter and then there's something new. So I got a Super Nintendo around the time that Nintendo 64 came out, which I believe was 1997. No, I think it might have been 1996 actually, maybe 1996. I don't know. I'm not the video game historian. Anyway, this is just Mikey's Video Game Madness, where he just rambles his ass off. But anyway, I remember seeing screenshots and I didn't know if it was for the Nintendo 64 or what, because this was the time where PlayStation, 3DO, the Atari Jaguar was coming out, and a lot of the screenshots were screenshots of cutscenes or promotional images and stuff like that. So when I saw these 3D renderings of Donkey Kong, I thought it was just, this is what the Nintendo 64 is going to look like. I had no idea that there was a game that was going to have CGI rendered graphics, which, looking back at it, these turned out really good because they had a game called Claymates, and I'm sure you're probably more familiar with the Clay Fighter games. And there was Clay Fighter 2 Judgment Clay, what original name that was. And there were some parts of the game that sort of looked like Clay, but they never pulled it off. So in order to do CGI, I would have never expected the Super Nintendo to be able to do that. Anyway, this game came out. I was probably more interested around the time this came out with it was like this Power Ranger game on the Sega Genesis. I probably should cover that at some point. I thought it was great, even though it was a super average fighting game, but it followed the storyline briefly. By the way, what do you guys think of that Power Rangers trailer? It's all like super dramatic and serious, and the special effects look halfway decent. And I always thought the appeal of Power Rangers, and I was into Power Rangers when it came out, I always thought the appeal of Power Rangers was how hokey it looked and how cheesy it was. I thought that was part of the charm. That's what was charming to me. It reminded me of like maybe a serialized Ultraman or Godzilla movie. But anyway, so there's this kid that lived down the street. My sister was friends with his sister, and I don't know if my mom was trying to I don't know if my mom and his mom are trying to force us to be pity friends or whatever, because we really didn't have anything in common beside video games. Like, he was a real more country oriented dude, like the kind of kid that had a shotgun when he was like, I mean, it was probably his dad's, but technically his, but he was the kind of kid that had like a shotgun, like a few shotguns, I believe. At like 12 years old, his dad would take him hunting and stuff like that. Had the camouflage shit going on, you know, really into playing cards and stuff like that. totally different from the way I grew up, but I guess we had video games in common. Anyway, I got invited to his house, and he had Donkey Kong Country, which I saw a couple of commercials of, and later on with game players I saw screenshots, and screenshots really didn't do this game justice. It looked good, but didn't look as good as it did like on TV. The animations, the sound, and everything. Me being a fan of Sega Genesis, you know, I was closed-minded. I thought Super Nintendo was just as good as Sega Genesis, but this game really showed it, and it just blew my mind. Even though it wasn't 3D, it seemed really 3D to me, even though it was a 2D game. It was confusing. I felt like I was playing a next generation game, even though like the gameplay and stuff is really similar to way Super Mario controls. It just blew my mind just seeing, like, for instance, the backgrounds in the cave, how reflective everything was. Like, the Sega Genesis could only display 64 colors. I believe the Super Nintendo could display 256, if I'm wrong. It's around that range. And the way they blended colors together, it looked really good. They would render all this stuff on a computer. When you originally bought Donkey Kong Country, it actually came with a VHS tape, which is a VCR for you kids that don't know. It looks like a giant cassette tape, like a giant cassette tape player. If you don't know what a cassette tape player is, I really can't help you, but there's a wonderful site called Wikipedia that you can look up. But it came with a VCR tape telling you exactly how they did all this, and they basically took a high polygon model and then basically made 2D images of it and animated it almost like stop motion with a CGI character, and then put it in 256 colors. However they did it way better than, I guess, Interplay is the one who made the Clay Fighter games and the Claymate games, and it just looked way better because the Clay Fighter and Claymates games only look like clay sometimes. These look like CGI models. Now, playing this on LCD monitor, it doesn't look as good, and I think the best thing I ever played this game on, where it looked the best, is I had a Commodore 64 monitor, and it had AV cables. At Christmas time, I was playing on the downstairs TV, which I don't know how big it was. It's probably like 20 inches or something. Magnavox is like one of those TVs that's a floor model. It's like wood grain, so it matches your coffee table and shit like that. It was some sort of hand-me-down. Like, all our TVs were hand-me-downs. My dad was a repairman growing up, so most of our TVs were stuff that somebody didn't want to pay to fix, and then we would end up getting it after my dad fixed it. It was a pretty big deal. It was like the biggest TV we ever had. It's probably like, I can't imagine how small it would be if I looked at it now, but in my head, it's like as big as my 65-inch TV that I have now, so it's crazy. I know it's probably like small as can be. I'm sure the TV probably weighed more than my 65-inch TV because it was a beast, just because all the particle board that looked like wood grain and everything. But anyway, I remember getting excited. I hooked it up to this gosh, I don't know how big it was, maybe 15-inch like Commodore 64 monitor. It was actually made for the computer, and it looked really good. I mean, you could plug in anything on it. I actually used to watch DVDs on it. It was my monitor for a long time. Like, I played PlayStation 2 was probably the last thing I played on it before it died on me. And DVDs looked really good on it too. It was like the best CRT monitor, and it only used the yellow, red, and white composite cables, and it looked great. And the sounds in this game are amazing. And back then, still on TVs, like, stereo sound was sort of a big deal. So to hear this game in stereo was amazing. Like, it still is. It was a treat to go back and play this now. This is the only Donkey Kong game that I ever beat. I think the second Donkey Kong game is my favorite, which at the time I never got. I don't know why. I got Donkey Kong Country 3 instead, which was a huge mistake because Donkey Kong Country 2, in my opinion, now that I've played them all, is the best one. but this is the one I played the most of. For Christmas, this was like a test cartridge at my dad's work, because my dad was one of those certified Nintendo people that if you got an old Nintendo product and you saw Mario with the screwdriver on the back of like whatever system, or you were playing from the original Nintendo, the Super Nintendo, and the Game Boy. I don't know if the Nintendo 64 had it on it or not, but yeah, my dad was certified by Nintendo, and he'd get these cool little embroidered shirts that had like Mario on Yoshi with a screwdriver. It was kind of cool. But anyway, he got the test cartridge, and of course his people at work were like stingy as fuck, so it's like, if you want this, I have to give my boss at least $10, even though it was a throwaway test cartridge to them. They probably had like 5 copies of the game, and I saw it and playing it at my friend's house. It was like, to me, this felt like some next level shit, at least as far as graphics go. I had not delved into Super NES RPGs, which are the best in my opinion. I really do like Phantasy Star 4. I like Phantasy Star 2 a lot too, even though I think it's way too hard. But as far as a forgiving RPG with a great storyline, once I got into the world of like Squaresoft, which is now Square Enix, and Nintendo's Earthbound, which was another awesome thing, and Mario RPG, which was a collaboration of Squaresoft and Nintendo, which in my opinion is like the best Mario themed RPG ever. They have the Paper Mario and the Mario and Luigi games that are like spiritual successors, but it's just not the same. And Donkey Kong Country 3, it looks really nice. It's probably the best looking one, but they changed the art style and the way the enemies looked, and you only could play as Dixie Kong and this giant baby. Dixie Kong was kind of cool because she could hover. The baby controlled exactly like Donkey Kong, and it didn't feel right, because at least in the second one you still had Diddy Kong from the first game, and I guess I was so used to playing the first game, like when it started not feeling familiar, I liked it still, but it just didn't have the same feeling that the other games have, even though it was quite nostalgic because the gameplay is very similar. This game's really cool because even though it's linear, there's so much hidden stuff. I'm not trying to find all the hidden stuff in this game, and I'll tell you, there's 2 things in this game that are your worst enemy: barrels and hornets. A lot of people say this game's super hard, but if I can beat it, I feel like anybody can beat it. I'm not nearly the best game player in the world, but you just got to keep at it. The controls are smooth. You got to get used to the momentum. I'm playing with the older controller, so it's a little bit slippery, and I haven't played this in a long time, but I mean, I got to the point where I could get through these levels like without thinking twice about it until I got towards the end. But the music's awesome, the sound's awesome, everything's great. It was kind of disappointing when Donkey Kong 64 came out, because I was like, oh, I'm sure that's going to be amazing. They decided to make a 3D game out of it. And the Nintendo 64 and the PS1 days were kind of a confusing time for platformers, because I don't think they really knew what to do with the 3D space. They're always used to get to point A to point B, you know? What do we do with this 3D space? They're just gonna walk around everything. Crash Bandicoot got it right with the narrow levels to create that 2D feel in a 3D plane, but yeah, they didn't know what to do. So most 3D platformers during the PS1 and Nintendo 64 era were all about just collecting a shitload of items, which I really didn't like. Luckily, there was a lot of other action-oriented games and puzzle platformers coming out, like I guess like Tomb Raider, and PlayStation 2 is really where I got into it. I think the PS1, most of my favorite games are survival horror and RPG games. But yeah, felt like after Donkey Kong Country 3 came out, they never quite rekindled the magic, and then another company took on the license with Donkey Kong Country Returns, which is available on the Nintendo Wii and the 3DS. I only played the 3DS version. My sister had it on Nintendo Wii, but they never wanted to play that game because my sister and her husband at the time were kind of buttholes when it came to guests. They always kind of did what they wanted to and didn't really accommodate the guests, even though I really wanted to play that game. But those are great, and there was a sequel on the Wii U. But anyway, if you haven't played this game, definitely try it out, and if you haven't played it in a long time, I definitely recommend checking it out again. Thank you so much for watching. I hope you're all doing well.
If you want to, like, comment, and subscribe. Thanks for watching.